Okay, so sorry guys, back wrong way. So when we see the word English language learners, right away we should think of our ELP standards that dictate how we are to, provide focused, systematic instruction of acquiring language. So the ELP standards, again, pre-teaching vocabulary, visuals, 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 using sentence frames, not just for writing, but also for activities in which beginners or intermediates might have to speak in a group discussion. They can use those sentence frames to compose responses in their discussion. So sentence frames can be used for lots of ways, in many ways. Think, pair, share, that low risk negotiation of knowledge after we've asked a question helps the student gain knowledge and practice that oral language proficiency, practice utilizing content specific vocabulary. And so we need that not just for the ELLs, but for all our students, right? The goal is that they can all speak intelligently about or concerning particular concepts, academic concepts, mitosis, economics, in intelligible ways. But that takes practice, and that takes opportunities for practice. So we need to provide myriad, manifold, many millions of opportunities for the students to practice speech, for the students to practice speaking about those new academic concepts, that new vocabulary, the new skills that they've learned. So listen, speak, talk, 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 talk. I said, talk. We want them talking. A silent classroom is not a classroom that is actively learning. It's certainly not actively learning language. So we need to, create an atmosphere where communication is fluid and frequent. And last but not least, creating background knowledge. And this is a big one. And it's a big one for ELL students, but it's also a big one for everybody else too, which is why I always say ELL practices are best practices for all. Creating background knowledge. It kind of goes a little bit in line with what I was talking about before, Ms. Mendoza, about you speaking to your students about the objective that you'll be doing, right? It's not enough for you to just have a lesson objective. You have to speak about it with the students. This is what we'll be doing today. This is the language objective that we'll be doing today. This is a social emotional learning objective we will be doing today, so they know what's going to happen. But a background knowledge, creating good background knowledge, goes beyond that. It's like a movie preview, if you will, to the lesson. So your vocabulary instruction with visuals is going to be in that background knowledge section at the beginning. And what it does is that it makes them more prepared for the learning activities. Instead of going into the movie blind, they go in with a sense of, what do I need to go? Where are we going to be viewing? Who it is about? And so creating that background knowledge helps, again, sort of mesh or support students in their areas of comprehension, right? Visually, language-wise, and skill. Like, what particular skill am I going to be doing? Age group. Whenever they say an age group or a grade level in the scenario, in the question, it is like 90% of the time important. They're trying to tell you something about what's most appropriate developmentally for the developmental age that they've stated. So if they say this, Ms. Sauceda's second grade class, we have to know about second graders. And on Wednesday, I think we spoke in depth about development, right? We talked about how the PPR really has a lot of questions concerning EC through 6 and how that's challenging for people if you teach high school, right? You're not super familiar with the ways, developmental ways, the nuance of that age group and what particulars or changes we make to our lessons, to the structure, to the schedule. And we discussed that. Remember, we discussed EC through 6. Actually, I'm going to let one of you that came on Wednesday, what did we learn about transitions and younger kids? What did we learn about being a teacher of early child students and our use of transitions? Does anyone remember? Ms. Ramos?
Ma'am, doesn't it have to
Yeah,
be structured?
I'm sorry, repeat that.
Doesn't it have to be structured and on in like a good fashion time?
Absolutely.
A lot of repetition so that the kids know what needs to be done, so transition doesn't take long.
Exactly. And remember, we learned that actually transitions are the most stressful like part of the day for students, right? So the more routine procedures, a signal, this is what I do when I'm finished, this is what I do when I line up. And another one of those was that we limit in our structure. Like if you're planning your schedule, you want to limit the amount of times you actually need to transition, right? So that we minimize those time periods where the student is in this like influx and stress. And so to alleviate stress during transitions, having those routines, having structure, practicing, faithfully going by the plan is most appropriate for that grade level. So each grade level has its own particular nuance of in their, growth and development. So the early child, lower attention spans, need for more structure and routines, because if not, chaos ensues. So when they tell you an age group or grade level, there are developmental theories, cognitive, emotional, physical, that you have to consider before you choose what is most appropriate, which is the most appropriate response. Because they might have two appropriate responses, but one is not for second graders and the other one is. So that makes the most appropriate the one that's for second graders. So paying attention to the small details, sort of investigating these questions before you choose that final response. When they say oral language proficiency, what they're talking about is listening and speaking skills. And so if the question says, oh, the teacher wants to increase oral language proficiency, then the answer choice must absolutely include students practicing listening and speaking skills. If the activity doesn't have it, then it can't be the right answer. Student motivation. They're talking about intrinsic or extrinsic, right? And we all know extrinsic is the easy to come by, but it's not lasting. It's giving somebody a sticker, or me telling my kids, I'll give you hot Cheetos and cheese at the end of the week if you do this. And so that's an external, it works momentarily, but it is waning, it will fade. Intrinsic motivation is what we want to ignite in our students. And we can do that by doing particular things, giving the students a choice, an option, making them feel like agents in their, giving them agency and they're agents in their own learning, instead of just sort of passive people in the classroom. They are active agents in their own learning. So incorporating your students' interests helps motivate and create internal intrinsic motivation. I am asking my students to write a research paper. I can do one of two things. I can tell them that they can choose their own topic. If I do that, most of them are going to be intrinsically motivated to do well on their paper. They already had that buy-in. The buy-in was their interest. They already like what they're writing about. Now they just have to follow through with the skills. Makes it easier. But if you let them choose, you might get some crazy responses. What I like to do, and students kind of appreciate it, is make a carefully crafted list of things they can choose from that they would like. But you have to know your students to do that. And it makes it easier, and you don't sort of have to deny inappropriate things, but making a list of things that they would enjoy, things compiled from your knowledge of your students and what that they would like to learn, and then allowing them the choice. This goes the same for assignments. If you are not, for instance, I was an English language arts and reading teacher, and so I could, if I had wanted to, make all of their assessments and all of my checks for understanding a written format, right? They have to write a paragraph, write an essay. But if I'm not particularly assessing their writing, then I can have other types of assignments that would be more interesting, or that my students would choose, and give them that opportunity. That creates internal buy-in. So if I'm going to give a book report, and instead of writing the report, I can talk to Miss Sauceda and give a oral report, I'm going to do that if that's my way to shine. And I chose that way, and I'm more happier as a student choosing, oh, I'm going to do a visual representation, I'm going to write an essay, or I'm going to have, you know, an oral response. Giving them that choice makes a huge difference. It's like, you're not directing me to do something. I chose this one, that internal intrinsic buy-in. Class climate. When they say class climate, they're talking about the environment. And they're not really talking about the climate or the temperature, but in a way they are. And you are the barometer, and you are also the thermostat. You control how the class feels. Does it feel safe? Does it feel comfortable, predictable? A place for learning to take place. And we talked about that in depth last week, talking about competency 3 and the particular things that we can do to help our students' learning environment a place that's effective for instruction. Kinesthetic. You see kinesthetic, you should remember it's a learning style. But if they say kinesthetic, the answer choice has to have movement in it, however small. It has to include movement in that activity. And we do that because not only is it a preference of some students, but it does something. It internalizes comprehension when physical activity is in conjunction with cognitive activity. Again, developmentally appropriate. I put it here twice, the same concept. The other way I said age or grade level. Now I'm saying developmentally appropriate. When they say that, they want you to think about age or grade level. Best practice for the age group or grade level. When they say developmentally appropriate, you should get alarm bells off and say, okay, what are they asking me to do? What are they asking me to think about? Early child, middle grade, or high school. Plan appropriately for that developmental category. Right. Okay. Oops, sorry, guys. Here's our standards. Here's where we are, where we were last week. Going over standard 2 and competencies 5 and 6. We talked about how best to manage classroom procedures. What sort of things need to be in place in early child classrooms, what things need to be in place in middle grade, and so forth. We briefly discussed, and I believe, I don't remember who it was that said, but there was a question about volunteers and paraprofessionals. And it's really important that we have open communication and that the expectations for their help are clearly defined, or not defined, but they're like explicitly stated to them, that you're like, I need you to help me during transitions, and make sure like that they have a very focused, purposeful reason for being there, and they should know what that is. Standard 3. Standard 1 and standard 3 are the most highly tested standards in on the exam, right? So domain 1.
Excuse me, we can't see anything. Well, maybe it's just me.
No, are you serious? That's terrible. Thank you for telling me. You're right. Okay.
There we go.
Excellent. So standard 1 makes up 34%. And then standard 1 makes another appearance in domain 3, along with standard 3. So very, very important. Standard 1 and standard 3. For sure, standard 1 is so important because we know it shows up in 2 different domains, both over 30% of your exam, right? Very, very important for you to have a solid understanding about the planning that goes in for all students, the planning. And standard 3 is about your implementation. you providing and doing your plan by providing responsive instruction. Responsive instruction is you not just direct instructing in the front of the class and then saying, okay, guys, do your work. Let me know if you need anything. And then that's the end of it. No, it's you moving around the room, checking for understanding, looking at the work, having mini conversations with your students. If they're off the mark, probing them with questions to get them to rectify the mistake or clarify their misconception, but you are actively responding to an issue. So it would be like if I'm walking along my classroom, my students are writing an essay and I see, some people are not, or I see a student and they're using their commas incorrectly. And we just had a comma lesson. I'm not going to wait until they turn it in and just give them a bad grade. I'm going to go point to a particular sentence and say, hey, Antonio, let's look at this sentence here, right here. What do we have going on here? I want you to give that one a good once over. What's happening? Dependent, independent clauses. Let's take a look at it and work on that. That is a responsive instruction. I have already seen that he has a misunderstanding or an incorrect, thought or skill. And so in lieu of just marking the grade down, I'm going to reteach right then and there, utilizing effective communication techniques and strategies to help the students right then and there when we have them. I wanted to touch base with you guys because communication is really important. We need to have students get better at communicating with each other. Cooperative learning groups are best practice. Cooperative learning groups need to be carefully crafted. They have to be heterogeneous. Students in homogeneous groups, especially ELO students, do demonstrably worse than students in heterogeneous. And just to define vocabulary and kind of in case anyone has holes in comprehension, heterogeneous means that different types of student, different skill ability, different language ability, different socioeconomic ability, different culture, it is not the same. There are differences here. Homogeneous is same. Everybody's the same. So to have a group and everybody has the same beginner level speaking skills and they're in a group together, it's not going to work. That no learning will take place there. And in fact, it doesn't. Research time and time again has shown us the ramifications of homogeneous grouping on student learning. Create lessons with clearly defined structure around which activities are organized. You create lessons around your objective, that one objective that you want to achieve and the way in which that you're going to assess them. You need to know, how are we going to understand that? And there's lots of different ways for us to create lessons. You have your direct instruction model, teacher direct instruction, which you can't move away from, even though it's not sustainable or good for an entire class period. It is important. When I give vocabulary instruction, it's direct instruction. But we want to focus on the students being the larger workers in cognition, the larger workers in the lesson. And that has to be student-centered. There's many ways we can do student-centered, and a lot of it has to do with like group work, cooperative learning. There's one way, and I'm going to look to see if I can find it here. How to present content to students in relevant and meaningful ways, create activities and assignments that are appropriate for students that actively engage them in the learning process. Group work, cooperative learning is super engaging, but that being said, students have to have practice and training. You had to have started with like some little less complex ideas and concepts during their group work. Everybody has to have, be responsible for their participation and for their learning and their teammates learning. So there's lots of strategies we can use. The jigsaw method, which is a fun way. The students always really like to do the jigsaw method. And so you might have groups of like 4, or you could have even up to groups of 6, and you give each individual group member a different section of to look at. You have different groups, and every group has the same text. Each group member has a different section. And then the groups work on their own parts individually. And then each group member gets up and goes and meets with the expert that has their same piece of information, and they build and they talk about their understanding. So group 2 and group 3 and group 4 and group 1, all of their economics section people are going to go to this table and they're going to talk about economics, and that they expand upon their own understanding with other people that read that particular part as well, and they build on it. It's sort of like a think, pair, share, but in a group on a specific topic. And then you send them back, and each team member, each group member jigsaws back. That's why it's called a jigsaw puzzle, because they leave and then they come back. And then they come back stronger and better because they just met with, 4 or 5 other people who read the same thing, and they go deeper into it. They come back and explain it, and each group member explains their piece, and then they go over it as one unit, like as one whole topic, that jigsaw. That keeps everybody engaged and moving and responsible for their individual portion. Okay, guys, let's go to some questions for us. Do I have any questions so far? Another very important side note, I know I've mentioned it before and we've talked about it, but I have people who haven't come here before, but Bloom's taxonomy regarding the level of critical thinking that's needed for an activity or the skill. And we should be practicing all of them, but we want to try always to achieve the highest level, and that's creating synthesis. And that's changed since research, right? When Bloom's taxonomy in 1956 came up with his theory, he actually had evaluating as the highest level of critical thinking, but it's not, it's synthesis. So in order to synthesize or create something new, you have to have already analyzed and evaluated what works, what doesn't work, and I'm going to bring these pieces together and make this new thing. So what's important to remember as far as Bloom's taxonomy are the skills that we will be practicing in some of those higher thinking. The girls, Zurine's off. So evaluating and creating, highest levels, analyzing, evaluating, and creating. But we can never get away from some of the, low critical thinking skills. This doesn't mean that they're not important. They certainly are. We need to be able to describe and define and examine. We just don't want for that to be the ending point. Once you can describe and examine and identify, you should move on to be doing more challenging activities with that same knowledge. So adapting, assembling, creating, developing a new thing, hypothesizing. And they're going to ask you on the exam not to define a level of Bloom's taxonomy or which level would be most appropriate. They're going to say this Miss Sauceda wants to increase her critical thinking in her activities. Which of the following would most appropriately or would best achieve her goals? And you're going to have to choose an activity that is critical thinking. And we have them listed here. So please make sure you look over these before you test.
Do we have the document?
Yes, sir, you absolutely do. It's in your PPR sessions Google Drive.
Because I was looking for it, but I didn't find it.
You didn't see it? Do you have access to this drive, Mr. Waldo?
I don't, ma'am.
You don't? Okay. Oh, so sorry. I'm gonna put the link for you in the chat bar right now. If you could just open it up on your computer and save it so you have that, We took some of these. Oh, look, here's one. And we just went over it. So this is a good sort of assessment of your knowledge. A fifth grade social studies teacher is teaching a lesson on the various types of governments. The teacher decides to split the class into groups and perform a jigsaw activity, where groups of students learn about a form of government. The students in each group then disperse to teach what they've learned to other students. Which of the following benefits does a jigsaw activity provide? Okay, before we begin looking at the answer choices, remember our strategies. We mindfully read, we identify keywords and phrases. What is the goal in the scenario?
So fifth grade.
Fifth grade, yes. Keyword and phrase right at the back. So it's early child, not super early, but it's elementary, fifth grade.
Jigsaw activity.
Jigsaw, that's right, jigsaw activity.
How is this going to benefit our students?
Right, so it benefits them how? That's the goal. Like, why use jigsaw? What benefit does it provide?
What?
Let's take a look. It allows students to independently learn from the content of the lesson. It allows the teacher to assess students' ability to summarize and synthesize content. It ensures that students with special needs can fully participate. It provides an opportunity for students to interact with teachers one-on-one. Now, I want for you to eliminate the ones that you can bet yourself $5 are not the right answer, and then I want to hear why.
Number 4 is the interaction with teacher one-to-one. So I think that's something different.
Yeah, that's
Then
not
our
happening
goal.
here. You're right. They're not
That's
doing
not
that. The students are split into groups and they perform the jigsaw activity, which we just discussed earlier. So they're not working one-on-one with the teachers. That's not happening.
So we can eliminate 4.
4 and bet ourselves $5. That is not the answer.
And number 3 is talking about our special ed students that are mainstream, that we need those inclusion. But is that the goal that it's asking in the question?
No, it's not that. No,
No, it's not.
no. And
So
we always ensure, you know what I mean? That's like,
we always
best practice.
ensure.
Yes.
So that's one of the goals that it's asking. It's not asking that, right? No, it's not
Right,
asking.
not.
So we can eliminate 3.
Number 1.
Right. Why is number 1 not
Because it's
there?
independently
Right,
and
and
it's in
they're working
groups.
together, right? They're in groups. It's not independent. So this word makes it, in this answer choice, makes it 100% positive it's wrong. And it does allow the teacher to assess the student's ability to summarize and synthesize content. Remember, they're going and learning about one thing, and then they're bringing it back, summarizing it and synthesizing it in their group. So 2 is the best answer. Let's see. All right, do that. Let's do this one. Okay, the following daily instructional objective is posted on the board of a science class. Content objective. Students will interpret data relative to moving objects and produce a motion graph. Which of the following additional pieces of information would the teacher need to post alongside the content objective in order to meet the criteria of sheltered instruction? I should add that word to the ELL slide. Okay, what keywords and phrases do you see, guys? And what is the goal? in this scenario?
So we have the content objective,
Right?
and we need
Yeah, so the following,
alongside this objective.
what is the question asking of us? What is the goal here?
So what to meet the criteria of the sheltered instruction?
To meet the criteria of sheltered instruction. So what is sheltered instruction? Very, very, very important. It's sheltered instruction is done with our ELL students, particular strategies that we use to help them acquire language. So I'm going to add sheltered instruction to our ELL slide.
So when we shelter instruction, we give these students extra time to,
There's many ways that of sheltered
We-
instruction. Right.
we access the prior knowledge and we give that extra time. Yes.
Exactly. One of the strategies is predefining academic vocabulary that's going to be in the lesson. That's many of the ELL strategies are sheltered instructional strategies. But so we're looking for additional pieces of information. The goal is what extra information needs to be next to this content objective in order to be in line with sheltered instruction. So let's take a look at the answer choices. We have a description of the cooperative learning activities students will engage in as part of the content objective, a list of vocabulary words that students will learn or review during the lesson, a language objective that will be used to focus on developing student vocabulary, a description in the lesson plan of how the teacher will modify language to increase student comprehension. Now, which of these can you eliminate and bet yourself $5? That's not it.
I believe number 4, because this is a description of the lesson plan of how the teacher will modify.
Right. So right next to the content objective on the board, you're going to write a description of the lesson plan. That's not needed. And
No.
that's not even part of
That's not, we're not doing that.
right. And remember,
No.
the goal is sheltered instruction. It has to be something that will help support in line with language learners. Okay. What else might we be able to eliminate and bet ourselves $5?
Number one.
Number one, a
The
description.
same thing you're describing.
Right, you're just describing a cooperative learning activity that that they'll engage in. That's not sheltered instruction, and that isn't the added piece of information we're looking for. What else could you write up here next to the content objective in order to meet the criteria of sheltered instruction? And I've told you this before. Remember, I said that
Yes. We need the objective and the language.
the
So
language objective.
We need the language objective.
Yes,
So I
ma'am.
believe number 3 is the correct.
That's right. The language objective. Remember how I said in the beginning of class, you should discuss the objectives. This is what we'll do. Some teachers only put in an academic content objective. That's not enough. Every single student is acquiring language actively, and we need to have focus and systematic instruction in reading, listening, speaking, and writing. So a list of vocabulary words would be, again, like a description, and it's not going to be fruitful for the students. Having the language objective and having a discussion on what they'll be practicing as far as listening skills, speaking skills, reading and writing in context of the content objective is what is going to be most helpful for your students. It's part of the background knowledge before they begin the lesson. Excellent work, guys. I am going to let y'all a little bit early because I have a room full of children and everybody's been patiently waiting for me to finish, but I want to give you some time to ask some questions. And of course, I will see everybody on Wednesday at 6:30.
Thank you, Ms. Sauceda, for everything. I'm doing my notes and I'm trying to do more research in things and doubts that I have.
Okay.
I thank you for everything. Everything has been so helpful. You are great.
Thank you, Ms. Ramos. You're so very sweet. And thank you guys for your hard work and you're continuing to study, and y'all are going to pass this test and be amazing educators. So I thank you for your service, and have a beautiful Easter.
Thank
Yes,
you, Ms.
thank you,
Sauceda. You
thank
too.
you.
Thanks a lot.
Yes, thank you,
Have
guys.
a beautiful Easter with you and your family, Miss Sauceda.
Yes, ma'am. You too. Bye,
Thanks.
guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you, Miss Sauceda. Bye.
Thank you.